300 Apache warriors ringed Thaddeus Whitmore's ranch house, a silent, formidable circle carved from the morning mist. War paint, stark and vibrant, reflected the dawn's light, and the breath of their mounts plumed in the crisp desert air. Each warrior held a personal grievance against the man within. But a mere 12 hours before, Thad had been just another weary rancher, nursing the wounds of a war that had claimed his leg and his belief in human kindness. The Arizona sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues over his modest cattle operation, when the desperate crackle of gunfire echoed from Eagle's Canyon. Most would have ignored it, prudence dictating locked doors and feigned deafness. Yet, a certain urgency in the sporadic shots, a sense of a life desperately clinging to existence, compelled Thad to grab his rifle and ride towards the fray. He found the young Apache warrior sprawled in the dirt, 3 bullet holes staining his buckskin shirt a horrifying crimson. Blood seeped into the parched sand, a dark stain against the pale earth. The youth couldn't have been older than 22, and the intricate beadwork adorning his attire suggested a figure of significance within his tribe. Thad's initial impulse was retreat, to abandon the Indian to his fate, as so many others would have done without a second thought. In these territories, many a white man would have ended his suffering with another bullet. The Apache raids had plagued the settlements all summer, fueling a vicious cycle of animosity. But when the young man's eyes flickered open, fixing on Thad not with fear or hostility, but with a strange, almost pleading recognition, a forgotten ember of compassion ignited within Thad's hardened heart. The warrior tried to speak, a bloody froth bubbling on his lips. A single word, broken and desperate, escaped. "Help!" Thad stood frozen, his finger hovering over the rifle's trigger. Logic screamed at him to turn back. This Apache might have been responsible for the burning of the Abernathy farm last month, perhaps even involved in the ambush of the stagecoach near Tombstone. But staring at the boy bleeding out in the desolate landscape, Thad saw only a soldier not so different from himself, dying far from everything he knew. He made his choice. Holstering his rifle, he dismounted and carefully lifted the wounded Apache onto his horse. The journey back to the ranch felt agonizingly long, every shadow a potential hiding place for a war party eager to deliver swift retribution. Yet he managed to get the Apache to his cabin, gently placing him on his own bed, and began to clean the grievous wounds. The bullets had miraculously missed any vital organs, but the blood loss was dangerously severe. As Thad labored by lamplight, carefully cutting away the blood-soaked shirt and applying pressure to the wounds, a detail caught his eye, causing his hands to still. Around the young warrior's neck hung a worn leather pouch. Inside, nestled amongst soft leather, was a photograph, faded and cracked, but undeniably clear. It depicted a white woman and a young Apache boy, perhaps 8 years old, their faces turned towards the camera, radiating warmth and affection. Thad's breath hitched in his throat. He had witnessed mixed families before, but this was different. This image spoke of a deep connection, a bond that transcended the animosity and bloodshed. It meant this Apache had roots in both worlds, that he was not merely a raider, but a bridge between two cultures, much like Thad had tried to be after the war. As dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in soft pastels, Thad managed to staunch the bleeding and coax some water between the unconscious warrior's parched lips. He was washing his bloodied hands in a basin when the chilling sound reached his ears. The unmistakable rhythm of war drums, distant but growing steadily louder, echoing across the desert from the direction of Apache territory. But it wasn't just the drums themselves that caused his blood to freeze. It was the precise pattern of the beats that made his hands tremble as he reached once more for his rifle. 3 short, then 4 long, followed by an unsettling silence. He remembered that somber cadence from his days with the cavalry along the Colorado River. It was not a call to war, nor a signal for the hunt. It was a death lament. Someone of immense importance had vanished, and the Apache nation was in mourning. The wounded warrior stirred on the bed, his eyes fluttering open. Seeing Thad standing guard with a rifle, he showed no fear, whispering something in Apache before switching to labored English. "My father." Searching. "Your father?" Thad's voice was barely audible. "Chief Running Elk of the White Mountain Apache, I am Nalnish, known also as Running Bear." The young man struggled to sit up, his hand instinctively pressing against his bandaged ribs. "Heading to meet Colonel Hayes? Discuss peace. Forge treaty." Thad felt the floor give way beneath him. A peace envoy. He had rescued a peace envoy. The Apache were not merely searching for a missing warrior. They sought the chief's son, the key to ending the bloodshed. "Sweet Jesus," Thad breathed, collapsing into a chair. "Do you have any idea what this means? If your people believe the whites murdered you during a peace negotiation—" "Terrible war," Running Bear finished, his voice weak. "My father, he trusts no white man." The drums throbbed louder, closer now. Thad could discern them coming from multiple directions. From the north, the south, and the east. They were being surrounded, and he was trapped inside his cabin with the one person who could either be their salvation or their doom. Running Bear attempted to stand, collapsing back onto the bed with a groan of pain. "I must go. Tell them I live." "You can barely stand. You'll bleed out before you reach the porch." "Then you must take me." Thad let out a humorless laugh. "You want me to ride out there with you? A white man carrying a wounded Apache warrior? We'll be riddled with arrows before we have a chance to speak." "Perhaps, or perhaps they will listen." Running Bear's dark eyes met Thad's gaze. "Why did you help me, white man? You know who I am now. You understand the consequences if my father thinks whites murdered his son?" It was a valid question, and Thad had no easy answer. He glanced at the photograph resting on the bedside table, the white woman and her Apache son. "Who is the woman in the picture?" Running Bear's expression softened. "My mother, Sarah Mackenzie. She was a teacher at the mission school. She fell in love with an Apache warrior who later became my father. She taught me English. She taught me about the white man's world, before illness took her. And your father. My father loved her, but after her death his heart grew cold toward whites. He said white man's diseases killed his woman, white man's bullets killed his people. The only reason he agreed to the peace talks was—" Running Bear paused, weighing his words. "Because? Because I told him that there were good white men. Men who saw the Apache as people, not animals. Men like the one who saved his son's life." The drums fell silent, leaving an unsettling quiet that felt more menacing than the relentless rhythm. Thad moved to the window, peering through a narrow gap in the shutters. The sight that greeted him turned his stomach to ice. Riders, at least 50 strong, advancing across the desert in perfect formation towards his ranch. Even at this distance, he could make out the war paint, the feathered headdresses, the glint of sunlight on rifle barrels and tomahawk blades. "They're coming," he whispered. Running Bear struggled to his feet, leaning heavily against the wall. "How many?" "More than I can count. Your father doesn't take chances, does he? He cannot afford to. Too many have died trusting white men." Running Bear managed to reach the window, each step leaving a crimson smear on the wooden floor. His face paled as he gazed at the approaching warriors. "This is not a search party," he said softly. "This is a war party." Before Thad could ask what that meant, they heard another sound that sent a shiver down both their spines. The thunder of hoofbeats, but not from the approaching Apache. These were coming from behind the ranch house, from the direction of town. Thad cursed under his breath, rushing to the back window. Through the morning haze, he saw another group of riders fast approaching. These were white men, at least 20 in number, led by Sheriff Marcus Dalton and Deputy Will Hendricks. Armed to the teeth, they rode like men charging into battle. "No, no, no," Thad muttered, his worst nightmare unfolding before his eyes. The townspeople must have heard the drums, seen the Apache massing in the desert. Now they were coming to defend his ranch, further escalating the already volatile situation. Running Bear observed, his voice filled with dread. "Now both sides come to fight. This is a catastrophe." Thad grabbed his rifle, checking the ammunition. "Your people will think I called for backup." "My people will assume you were scouting for an attack." Running Bear leaned against the window frame, blood seeping through his bandages. When they clash, good men on both sides will die. The Apache war party had halted 300 yards from the ranch house, forming a menacing line that stretched across the field. Using his field glasses, Thod identified Chief Running Elk himself, a towering figure on a paint horse, his face painted with streaks of black and red. The chief scanned the ranch, desperately seeking any sign of his son. Behind them, Sheriff Dalton's posse closed in, raising clouds of dust. In 10 minutes, both groups would be within firing range, Thod's ranch house caught squarely in the crossfire. "There must be a way out," Thod said, more to himself than to Running Bear. "Some way to communicate what truly happened before the bloodshed begins." "White flag," Running Bear suggested weakly. "I go out with white flag. Tell my father I am safe. You can barely stand, and a white flag won't stop bullets if someone gets trigger-happy. Besides, your own people might not recognize you at that distance. What if they think I'm forcing you out there as a human shield?" Running Bear was silent for a moment, then uttered words that made Thod's blood run cold. "My father. He will not wait long. If he believes the whites have murdered his son, what will he do? He will signal the other bands, the Mescalero from the south, the Chiricahua from the west. They all await word regarding the peace talks." Thod stared at him. "How many warriors are we talking about?" "Perhaps 1,000. Perhaps more." The weight of that number hit Thod with devastating force. 1,000 Apache warriors united against the white settlements. Every ranch, every town, every family from here to Tucson would be destroyed, all because he had chosen to save one wounded young man. Peering through the front window, Thod watched as the Apache war party began to fan out, preparing for what looked like an imminent attack. Chief Running Elk raised his rifle, a signal that prompted his warriors to check their weapons. From the back window, Sheriff Dalton's men were 5 minutes away, riding hard and spoiling for a fight. Running Bear closed his eyes, swaying on his feet. "You should not have saved me, white man. Now you will die for your kindness." But Thod was staring at the photograph once more, the image of Running Bear's white mother and her Apache son sparking an idea, dangerous, perhaps suicidal, but potentially their only hope. "That photograph," he said abruptly. "Does your father know you carry it? Does he recognize his wife?" "Yes, he gave it to me when I became a warrior. A reminder that love can bridge our worlds." "Perhaps." He was cut off by a gunshot that froze both their hearts. It echoed across the desert, originating from somewhere between the approaching groups. The shot shattered the fragile tension, instantly transforming the situation. Through his field glasses, Thod watched as the Apache war party erupted into motion, warriors urging their horses forward and brandishing their weapons. Chief Running Elk's face was twisted with fury as he pointed toward Sheriff Dalton's approaching posse. "Someone jumped the gun," Thod whispered. "Some nervous cowboy just ignited a war." But Running Bear's attention was fixed on a rocky outcrop midway between the two groups. "Wait," he said, squinting against the sun. "That shot did not originate from your people, or mine." Thod swung his glasses towards the rocks and felt a chill run down his spine. Partially concealed behind a boulder, a sliver of blue fabric became visible. "Cavalry," he breathed. "Son of a—" The pieces fell into place. Colonel Hayes, the man Running Bear was supposed to meet, had likely dispatched a patrol to escort the Apache delegation. Witnessing the confrontation between the townspeople and the war party, the soldiers probably mistook it for an Apache assault on civilians. Another shot rang out, this time definitively from the cavalry position. Thod could see the muzzle flash as the hidden soldiers opened fire on both groups simultaneously. "They are shooting at everyone," Thod said, his voice laced with disbelief. "The cavalry thinks this is a three-way battle." Chief Running Elk's war cry sliced through the air as his warriors charged toward the source of gunfire. From behind the ranch, Sheriff Dalton's men spurred their horses forward, convinced the Apache were attacking. And concealed within the rocks, a handful of cavalry troopers fired indiscriminately, attempting to restore order with bullets. Running Bear seized Thod's arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "You must stop this. You must reach my father before—" His words were drowned out by the eruption of gunfire as all three factions unleashed their fury upon one another. Bullets whined through the air, horses shrieked, and men screamed orders lost in the chaos. Thad watched in horror as Sheriff Dalton's youngest deputy, Tommy Morrison, tumbled from his saddle, an Apache arrow protruding from his shoulder. On the opposing side, a young Apache warrior fell lifelessly from his horse, struck by a cavalry bullet intended for someone else. "This is madness," Thad muttered, grabbing his hat and checking his rifle. "I'm going out there." "You will be slaughtered," Running Bear protested. "All three sides will shoot you." Perhaps, but if I don't try, we are all dead anyway." Thad looked at the photograph one last time, then handed it to Running Bear. "If something happens to me, ensure your father sees this. Tell him that there was a white man who believed in what your mother taught you." Running Bear struggled to his feet, determination eclipsing his pain. "Then we go together. You can barely walk. I can ride." Thad stared at him. The boy was right. If anyone could approach Chief Running Elk and halt this massacre, it would be his own son. However, getting Running Bear onto a horse and crossing a battlefield riddled with bullets was a death wish for both of them. The gunfire intensified, and through the smoke and dust, Thad saw men falling on all sides. Sheriff Dalton shouted orders, attempting to lead his men back to cover. Chief Running Elk divided his warriors, one group attacking the cavalry position, the other flanking the townspeople. In 5 minutes, this would become a complete slaughter. Thad made his choice. He threw open the cabin door and raced toward the barn, yelling, "Come on, boy. If we are going to die, let us die trying to do something right." As they reached the horses, a sound pierced through the chaos. A bugle call, long, clear, and unmistakable. It was the cavalry signal for a ceasefire, but it did not come from the rocks. It came from behind Chief Running Elk's war party. Thad halted in his tracks, his hand on his horse's bridle. Through the dust and smoke, a new group of riders approached from the north, blue uniforms, guidons waving, and at their head rode a man Thad recognized. Colonel William Hayes, leading a full company of cavalry. "The colonel," Running Bear breathed, leaning against the barn wall. "He comes for peace." The gunfire subsided as all three groups saw the approaching cavalry. Chief Running Elk raised his hand, signaling his warriors to hold fire. Sheriff Dalton's men fell back to the ranch, tending their wounded and reloading. But Colonel Hayes did not slow down. His column rode hard, and Thad could see the man's anger. The colonel came to negotiate peace, but found his patrol trapped in a gunfight. "He thinks the Apache broke the peace talks," Thad realized. "He will order an attack." Running Bear nodded. "And my father thinks the whites planned this. Both sides believe the other betrayed them." As Colonel Hayes's column drew closer, Thad heard him shout orders. The cavalry deployed, preparing to charge Chief Running Elk's position. On the other side, the Apache readied their arrows. Sheriff Dalton reached the ranch house and pounded on the door. "Whitmore, you in there? We need to ford up before they overrun us." Thad looked at Running Bear, whose eyes burned with determination. "There is still time," the young Apache said. "If I can reach my father before the soldiers charge, you will never cross that open ground, not wounded like this. Then we need another way." Running Bear's gaze fell on something behind Thad, and his eyes widened. The water tower. Thad turned to look. The wooden water tower stood 30 feet high between the house and the battlefield. From up there, a man could be seen by all three groups. "You want to climb up there and wave a white flag? They will use you for target practice." "Not a white flag." Running Bear pulled out the photograph, holding it up to the sun. "This my father will recognize it, and your colonel he will see Apache warrior trying to make peace, not war." It was insane. The water tower offered no protection, but it was the only position where they could be seen by everyone. Colonel Hayes was minutes from charging. Chief Running Elk had arrows knocked. Sheriff Dalton's men took positions, preparing for a siege. "I will go," Thad said. "I will carry the photograph. You are too weak, and if they shoot me, at least you can explain what happened." "No," Running Bear grabbed his arm. "Must be me, must be Chief's son. You just white rancher, they not listen." Through the front window, Sheriff Dalton gestured for them to come inside. From the north, Colonel Hayes raised his saber, preparing to signal the charge. And from the ridgeline, Chief Running Elk sighted down the shaft of a war arrow. Time was running out. Thod made a decision. "We go together," he said, grabbing Running Bear. "You hold that photograph high, and I will make sure you do not fall." As they started across the open ground, a rifle cracked. The bullet whizzed past Thod's ear. A cavalry sniper decided to stop them. Instead of hitting the dirt, Thod kept moving, dragging Running Bear. "They are shooting at us," Running Bear gasped, blood leaving a trail in the dust. "Let them," Thod growled. "Maybe that will get everyone's attention." More shots followed, but something strange was happening. The shooting was stopping. All three groups had noticed the wounded Apache and the limping white rancher stumbling across the battlefield. They reached the base of the water tower as Colonel Hayes's bugle sounded, a hold position. Through the ladder rungs, Thod could see the colonel had his glasses trained on them, trying to figure out what was happening. "Can you climb?" Thod asked. Running Bear looked up at the ladder, then at his blood-soaked shirt. "Have to." They started up together, Thod below to catch Running Bear, the young Apache above him. Each step sent fresh blood down onto Thod's hands, but Running Bear kept climbing. Halfway up, Running Bear's strength gave out, his hands slipped, and he started to fall. But Thod caught him, pressing him against the ladder. "I've got you, son," Thod whispered. "Just a little further." "Why?" Running Bear asked. "Why you risk everything for enemy?" Thod thought about that as they resumed climbing. "Maybe because you are not my enemy. Maybe because your mother was right. Or maybe because I am too stubborn to let good men die." They reached the platform as the sun climbed higher. From up here, Thod could see everything. Chief Running Elk and his warriors, Colonel Hayes's cavalry, Sheriff Dalton's men, and the trapped patrol. Every gun was pointed in their direction. Running Bear pulled out the photograph, his hands shaking. "My father!" he shouted in Apache, then in English. "Father, I live. I am safe." Chief Running Elk lowered his bow, shock and relief on his face. He recognized his son, but Colonel Hayes was also moving forward, and his expression was very different. He thought this was an Apache trick. "Colonel Hayes," Thod shouted. "This man is Chief Running Elk's son. He was coming to meet you when bandits shot him. I brought him to my ranch to save his life." The colonel reined in his horse. "Whitmore, Thaddeus Whitmore?" Thod nodded. "Yes, sir. 3rd Cavalry, Colorado Territory, discharged 1868. Something changed in Colonel Hayes's posture. He recognized a veteran, but he was still suspicious. "If that's true, why are there 300 Apache warriors surrounding your ranch?" Running Bear held up the photograph. "Because they came looking for me, Colonel. My father thought white men killed his son during a peace mission. He came here for war, but found this." Chief Running Elk had ridden close enough to see the photograph clearly. The war paint could not hide the tears. The chief dismounted and walked to the base of the water tower, looking up at his son. He spoke in Apache, his voice breaking. "What is he saying?" Thod asked. "He says he thought he had lost me like he lost my mother. He says he came here to burn the world, but instead found that there are white men with honor." Colonel Hayes approached. "Chief, I think we have some talking to do." But just as peace seemed possible, Sheriff Dalton made the worst decision of his life. He burst out of the ranch house with his rifle raised, pointing it at Chief Running Elk. "Don't you move, you red devil! This is a trap!" The peaceful moment shattered. Apache raised their weapons, Colonel Hayes shouted orders, and everyone was back to aiming guns at each other. "Dalton, no!" Thod yelled. "Stand down!" But the sheriff was beyond reason. "That Apache killed the Morrison boy's father last month. I do not care if he is here for peace. He is a murderer." Chief Running Elk's hand moved to his tomahawk, his moment of vulnerability replaced by anger. The other Apache moved forward, and Colonel Hayes was forced to raise his saber. Running Bear swayed on the platform, but he shouted to his father. "What did you tell him?" Thod asked. "Thod. I told him that if blood is spilled now, my mother's spirit will never forgive him. That she believed in peace, and her son still believes." Chief Running Elk looked up at the water tower, then at Sheriff Dalton, then at Colonel Hayes. For a long moment, The fate of hundreds hung in the balance. Then the chief dropped his tomahawk and walked toward Sheriff Dalton, his hands empty. "You speak of Morrison," the chief said in English. "I know this name. Young warrior from my band, he killed white farmer, but this warrior, he not listened to chief. He acted alone against my orders. I bring you his head if you want justice." Sheriff Dalton's rifle wavered. "You would turn over one of your own for peace?" "Yes, my son teach me that some things are worth more than revenge." Colonel Hayes dismounted and approached. "Sheriff, lower your weapon. Chief Running Elk, I appreciate your offer, but we will handle justice through proper channels." Running Bear was fading, but he pulled Thad's attention to the horizon. "Look, more riders!" Thad felt his stomach drop. Another group approached from the east. They were Apache, but from a different band, war paint weapons ready. "Mescalero," Running Bear breathed. "My father's allies. They come because they heard war drums this morning." The approaching warriors numbered at least 100, and they were coming for battle. They had heard the drums, seen the smoke, and assumed war had begun. Chief Running Elk saw them and mounted his horse. He rode toward the Mescalero, shouting orders, trying to stop them, but the Mescalero could not hear him, and they were spread out too wide to stop quickly. In minutes, they would hit Colonel Hayes's cavalry. "We have to get down," Thad said, but Running Bear was unconscious. Below, chaos was erupting. Colonel Hayes was shouting orders. Sheriff Dalton yelled for his deputies to take cover, and the war cries of the Mescalero grew louder. Thad looked at Running Bear, then at the photograph. All they had accomplished was about to be destroyed, unless someone could reach the Mescalero and tell them the truth. Thad made a decision. He picked up Running Bear and started down the ladder. When he reached the ground, Chief Running Elk was riding back toward them. "Cannot stop them," he said. "Too far, too fast?" "Maybe you cannot," Thad said, "but maybe someone else can." Colonel Hayes spurred his horse toward Thad and Chief Running Elk. "What do you have in mind, Whitmore?" "A cavalry charge," Thad said, "but not to attack, to intercept. You and the chief ride together toward the Mescalero. When they see an Apache chief and a cavalry colonel side by side, it might make them pause." Sheriff Dalton had joined them, his rifle lowered. "That's suicide. Those warriors are worked up for battle." Chief Running Elk looked at his son, then at the dust cloud. "Is good plan, but dangerous." Colonel Hayes replied, "But it is better than the alternative." He turned to his men. "Lieutenant Morrison, you are in command. If this goes badly, retreat to the ranch and hold position." "Sir, I cannot let you ride out there alone." "I will not be alone." Hayes looked at Chief Running Elk. "Will you ride with me, Chief?" The Apache nodded. "For my son, for peace." They mounted their horses and rode out together. Thad watched them disappear into the dust, then knelt beside Running Bear. The young man's breathing was shallow. The photograph was still clutched in his hand. "Come on, boy," Thad whispered. "Do not die on me now. Your father needs you." The sound of the Mescalero war party changed. The hooves were slowing and the war cries were shouts. Through his glasses, Thad could see Hayes and Chief Running Elk in the middle of the Mescalero, both men gesturing. It seemed to be working. The warriors were reining in their horses, listening. But it was a delicate moment. Sheriff Dalton sat down beside Thad. "Never thought I would see the day when I would be hoping for Apache to make the right choice." "People change," Thad said. "Sometimes it just takes the right moment." After what felt like hours, the riders began moving back toward the ranch. Hayes and Chief Running Elk rode at the front, followed by the Mescalero leader and his lieutenants. The rest had spread out in a loose formation. When they reached the ranch, Chief Running Elk knelt beside his son. Running Bear's eyes fluttered open, and when he saw his father, he smiled. "It is done, my son," the chief said in English. "Peace is made. Your mother would be proud." Colonel Hayes approached Thad. "Whitmore, what you did today, it took courage. If you ever want to rejoin the service, I would be honored." Thad shook his head. "Thank you, Colonel, but I think I will stick to ranching, though I suspect I am going to have some interesting neighbors from now on." Chief Running Elk looked up from his son. You save Running Bear's life. Apache people do not forget such things. This ranch, this land, it is under our protection now. Any man who threatens you threatens us. The three groups worked together to tend the wounded and establish a framework for a lasting peace treaty. The cavalry was freed, Sheriff Dalton's deputy was treated by an Apache medicine man, and Running Bear was made comfortable in Thodd's bed while his wounds healed. As the sun reached its peak, Colonel Hayes and Chief Running Elk signed a preliminary treaty. The Mescalero leaders added their marks, and Sheriff Dalton agreed to respect Apache boundaries. 3 months later, Thodd's ranch had become a meeting ground where Apache and white families traded peacefully. Running Bear, recovered, served as translator and liaison. The photograph of his mother was framed and hung in Thodd's cabin, and sometimes on quiet evenings, when the wind carried the sound of Apache children playing near the creek, Thodd would sit on his porch and remember the day when compassion had prevented a war and changed lives. The bitter rancher who had saved an enemy's life discovered that courage isn't in fighting but in choosing to heal. So, in the end, what started as a bloody conflict born of misunderstanding and prejudice blossomed into a fragile peace, all because one man, despite his own pain and fear, chose compassion. It's a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, empathy can bridge divides and pave the way for understanding. It's about recognizing our shared humanity, even when it's hardest to see. What did you think of the story? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you have any questions about the characters, the setting, or the themes explored? Feel free to leave a comment down below and let's start a conversation. And if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of courage, resilience, and unexpected connections, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future uploads. Thanks for watching.